An angel appeared at a faculty meeting and tells the dean that he has come to reward him for his many years of devoted service. The dean was asked to choose one of the three blessings: infinite wealth, infinite fame, or infinite wisdom. Without any hesitation, the dean asks for infinite wisdom. "You got it," says the angel, and disappears. All heads turn toward the dean, who sits glowing in the aura of wisdom. And finally, one of the colleagues whispers, "Say something. Give us your words of wisdom." The dean looks at them and says, "I should have taken the money."
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
At this time, Richard and Shelley's oldest daughter, Shelby, is going to pay tribute.
And I knew this day would come at some point in my life. However, I didn't think it would come so soon. And there's so much I want to say about my dad, but I would have to stand up here forever to do that. I've tried to find all the perfect words and to formulate all the right thoughts for this. But as I got up to preach last Wednesday for the first time ever, my dad sent me this text. He said, "Sometimes it feels overwhelming, but I'm here to tell you everything will be okay. You got this. Remember that no matter what, me and your mom got your back. Always and forever. Have fun tonight. Speak from your heart and don't look back. You will do great. I know you will, no doubt. I love you." I don't think he knew that this text would actually mean more than just another Wednesday night for me. It would actually be the text that would send me into speaking at his funeral a few days later. I know many of you knew my father as an officer. You may have seen him in his uniform with a badge and a squad car, but I saw my dad in a different fashion, always in his plaid pajama pants, book in hand, in his silver Ford F-150. Home has felt lonely without him here. I keep waiting for him to pull up in the driveway to come inside and tell us about some crazy car chase he got into. Or maybe even how terrible the 7-Eleven taquitos were for lunch. You never knew. It was always a surprise what he had gotten into that day. However, there was no heavier surprise than to receive a call that your dad had been shot and killed. It will be a day I never forget. I remember having conversations with my dad about him losing friends and officers in the line of duty. I have heard all the stories you can think of, but I've always had such a hard time with how the suspect is dealt with. Not that I didn't think there should be justice served, but my heart always ached for those who don't know Jesus. Their actions being a reflection of that. I was always told that I would feel differently if it happened to me, but as it's happened to my own father, I think I still feel the same. There has been anger, sadness, grief, and confusion, and part of me wishes I could despise the man who did this to my father, but I can't get any part of my heart to hate him. All that I can find is myself hoping and praying for this man to truly know Jesus. I thought this might change if the man continued to live, but when I heard the news that he was in stable condition, part of me was relieved. My prayer is that someday down the road, I'd get to spend some time with the man who shot my father. Not to scream at him, not to yell at him, not to scold him, simply to tell him about Jesus. I've spent the past few days thinking about what it was like for my daddy to lay lifeless in the flesh, but full of life with our Father in heaven. I wonder what it was like to reunite with his father, to see his other officers who fell in the line of duty, but mostly to sit at the right hand of Jesus. I can imagine it's a much better place than here. There are plenty of stories of his time spent as an officer, but there was another side of him that I had the privilege of knowing as my dad. He was goofy, incredibly too sarcastic. There was always a joke up his sleeve. There was never a volleyball, baseball, or football game he was going to miss. Never a band competition he'd miss either. Not for me or my siblings. He was our biggest fan on and off the court and field. He encouraged me, pushed me, and supported every decision I made. There are many days whenever I was a baby, like Doug said, he'd take me to the shooting range to train with other officers. And a few of them, like Doug, would watch me while he went to qualify. I'll never forget when I was younger, he would drop anything for me. Quite literally, on one of those days, he'd physically drop me as he got me out of the car. I'll never let him live that down, and he sobbed like a baby when he did. All jokes aside, he really has dropped anything and everything for us. If I wanted to dress up as Dorothy from Wizard of Oz for my 4th birthday, I wasn't doing it alone. He'd put all the face makeup on, make the costume, just to dress up as the Scarecrow alongside me. That's always been his heart, and we would always be the highest priority. I'm resting in the obedience of my dad to the Lord. In Isaiah 6:8 it says, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?' And I said, 'Here I am. Send me.'" And I don't ever think my father knew that his yes to the Lord would ever end up being like this. But as I look out to you all today, this is just a picture of the faithfulness of Jesus. I know my dad is looking down today with the biggest smile on his face in the arms of Jesus. I know as he entered the gates of heaven, he was greeted with, "Well done, good and faithful servant." What a moment that was. The days, weeks, months, and years ahead will surely be hard, but at the same time so sweet, knowing I'm 1 second, 1 minute, 1 hour closer to being with him again. There was still a lot of life I was looking forward to spending with him. 18 years with you, Daddy, was just not enough time. You were faithful, steadfast, kind, loving, selfless, and hardworking. On December 3rd, you were silenced, but you will forever live on in my heart today and all the days to come. I'd do anything in the world to see you again, to laugh with you again, to watch your terrible dance moves, to listen to another joke, to practice volleyball with you, to watch birds with you again, to catch one more fish, to wrestle one more time, to hug you again, to hear your voice at last. In my deepest wound, I saw the glory of Jesus, and it has astounded me. You're my hero, Daddy, and I'm so proud to call you my father. I love you most, and I'll see you someday soon.
Peace be with you. Friends, we come now to the holy season of Lent. I've said this many times before. It's like going back to spiritual basics during Lent. And the readings the church proposes for this holy season are always remarkably good and interesting and important. And watch the way the church juxtaposes the readings. I think with a heightened spiritual attention, we look at these scripture passages. So our gospel for this first Sunday of Lent is taken from Mark, and it's Mark's very laconic, very understated version of the temptation of Jesus in the desert. So in Matthew and Luke, you've got these kind of elaborate narratives that go through the various temptations of the devil and how Jesus reacts. Here's all that St. Mark says. The Spirit drove Jesus out into the desert. He remained in the desert for 40 days, tempted by Satan. He was among wild beasts, and the angels ministered to him. That's it. That's all we get as a description of what happened. So we do indeed hear about the temptation by Satan, but no details. And I want to focus on this mysterious, fascinating observation he makes after that. He was among the wild beasts, and the angels ministered to him. I want you to keep that image in your mind like a kind of icon. Jesus in the desert, angels above, so to speak, ministering to him, and then down below he's with the animals. It's a commonplace of Christian anthropology that we human beings are a bit like a microcosm. That means we're like a little universe in ourselves. Why? Because we combine in ourselves both the spiritual and the material. Let me say it again. It's a very simple but very important point. We combine in our persons the spiritual and the material. Look at the spiritual side. You know, we can listen to Mozart. We hear Mozart with our ears, but we take in the great patterns of Mozart with our minds. We can study, Einstein, and we can study the great scientists and the most abstract philosophers. We can read Kant and Hegel and Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas. We can design computers. We can design spacecraft that will fly to distant planets. We can pray in such a refined way that we almost lose our contact with the earth and we rise up toward heaven. In all those ways, everybody, our spiritual side is on clear display. At the same time, like it or not, we have bodies. You know, we get tired and we get too hot or too cold and we have to sleep and we have to eat and drink. And sometimes our passions, our emotions get the better of us. Sometimes we're just dictated to by our bodily passions. We're both spirit and matter, both soul and body. It's our glory, yes. We're a microcosm. It's the unique way that God has made us. God did make the angels pure spirits to give him glory in their distinctive way. God did make purely material things. They give glory to God in their unique way. And he made us hybrids of body and soul. It's our glory, and it's our agony. Much of human life, am I right, fellow sinners, is experienced as a kind of struggle. It's a warfare between the spirit and the body. The spirit warring against the body warring against the spirit. One of the results of sin is that the two of them have become kind of dislocated from one another. Go back to Paul to the Romans chapter 7. You find those wonderful but troubling lines, right? The good that I would do, well, that's what I don't do. The evil that I would avoid, that's what I end up doing. And then he says, who will deliver me from this body of death? Well, see, he's witnessing to how we experience on the inside the struggle between body and soul. Okay, now look over the history of philosophy and religion and spirituality. What do you find? You find lots of attempts to deal with this problem. Now, one of them, very popular, by the way, from ancient times to the present day, is a kind of imperialism of the soul, an imperialism of the spirit. Think here of, Plato, and think of Plotinus, and think of Gnosticism and these ancient dualistic systems that say, I know the body, but the body's bad news. And the body is like a prison. That's Plato. And the whole point of the spiritual life and intellectual life for Plato is to have a jailbreak, escape from the prison. Same with the Gnostics. They saw the spiritual spark kind of buried deep inside. And it's just we have to get rid of these bodies and move up beyond them. Forms of dualism today, you bet. It's a very popular option to glorify the spirit and to kind of denigrate the body. Does that solve the problem? No, because the body and soul are, as it were, so woven together that all those attempts always kind of founder. They always come up against the rocks because you can't just leap spiritually out of the body. It doesn't work. Now, there's the other way to handle the problem. Forget about the spirit. These are people that live, let's say, in a purely sensual way. They're completely oriented to the body and the needs and the goods and desires of the body. Now, popular option, you bet, from ancient times to the present day. Think of even like today, a playboy philosophy or a purely materialistic approach to life. It's just satisfying the desires of the body. Whatever the spirit means, well, that's some kind of abstraction. What really matters is the needs and goods of the body. Is that going to work? Because like it or not, we're a hybrid of body and soul. And if you try to just bracket the spiritual needs, they're going to rebel against you. It's interesting. When you go to Rome and you go into the Sistine Chapel and look at those great paintings of Michelangelo, and gorgeous, of course, beautiful. But what you notice is the figures, there's something roiled about them and something that's tensive about them. All the musculature that Michelangelo shows is not just to show off his skill. It's to show these figures struggling. Well, see, what is that? It's a depiction of what I've been talking about. It's the soul struggling against the body against the soul. And deep down, we want to resolve this tension. Now, we're entering the season of Lent. Can I suggest to everybody, the church gives us this interesting, peculiar little reading from Mark, that this might be an important work of Lent, to bring body and soul properly together. See, what's one point of the fasting and abstinence and discipline of Lent? It's to discipline the body lest it try to dominate the self too much. How come we fast and abstain? Well, sometimes our desire for food and for drink and for sex and for pleasure becomes too dominant. And the spirit balks at that. The spirit needs to have the body disciplined to some degree. Now, to be fair, does it work the other way? Yeah. Can sometimes the spirit or the soul be too dominant, that it doesn't respect the integrity of the body, that we start playing dualistic games? Could part of the discipline of Lent be a healthy rediscovery of your bodiliness? I remember when I was at the seminary years ago, and, it's a temptation of seminarians as you get, so into the spiritual life and so into these high, rarefied things, you can almost forget that you have a body. I remember telling the seminarians, remember to exercise. Remember to eat well. In essence, pay attention to your body. Don't treat your body as something that's, low level. It's the integration of body and soul that we want. Well, look at this image again now that we started with. Jesus in the desert, the angels ministering to him, and he was with the animals. What do you see now? In his own person, we find a reconciliation of heaven and earth. We find the coming together of the spiritual and the material. How important, everybody, that we say the Word became flesh. See how beautifully that's expressed, the Word. That means a purely abstract pattern. That's something entertained by the mind. That's a spiritual reality. But the Word in Jesus becomes flesh and dwells among us. You see Jesus in his own person, as it were, knitting together a universe that had fallen apart because of sin. What does sin lead to? This disintegration of the self. I like that term. I mean, the integration means, hanging together. When something disintegrates, the elements fall apart from each other. How come we experience the war of spirit against body, body against spirit? Because of sin. Now, just a quick observation. The link made between that gospel and our first reading for this first Sunday of Lent has to do with Noah. You say, now why in the world would the church link the story of Noah and the ark? What does God accomplish in that story? As sin has affected its destruction, right? So there's the tohu vabohu, the primal chaos is back. That's the great flood of Noah that's destructive of life. That's what sin does. But what does God do? God rescues his human creatures, yes indeed, Noah and his family, and all the animals. This remnant of God's good creation also saved on the ark. God is not playing a Platonic game in the Bible. What I mean, the goal is not, hey, let's get away from matter as much as we can and move up to a purely spiritual heaven. That isn't it. In fact, don't we say in the creed, we look to the resurrection of the body and life everlasting. We don't say we look to the escape of the soul from the body. No, we want the resurrection of the body, the whole person saved. Think of Noah's Ark now as a kind of image or icon of that. Just as Jesus, the angels ministering to him, the animals attending to him, is an icon of a reconciled world. Everybody, can I suggest this would be a really good way to pray your way through Lent, is to understand more deeply the ways in which the disintegration of soul and body exist in you. And then with the icon of Christ in the desert in mind, ask the Lord to re-knit these elements of your very self. And God bless you.
Of the program with the discussion as it has unfolded. Thank the Lord, Rush Limbaugh's on by the Rush Hawkins Singers is exactly what's called for. Rush Limbaugh's On.
Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.